So it is no surprise that there are massive changes coming to Midnight for not just healers, but for all classes and roles. But in this video, we're going to kind of talk more about the healer side of things. And are these changes going to be good, or obviously are they going to be bad? And looking at the forums, a lot of people are, considering the latter. I'm not here to change your mind, just to allow you to look at it with a different perspective. And there might be a little copium in here. So there's really no right or wrong answer or, whatever. It's all opinionated and complete speculation. I also want to add, I think it's important to note that personally my highest Mythic Plus score is just over 3,300. And the reason why I'm bringing this up, I think it's important, is because I'm coming from a place that's probably a little bit more relatable to the average player than if I was a top 1% player. Because I think their concerns and their issues are valid, but they don't necessarily apply to some of the, players on the other end of the spectrum. They don't deal with the same issues that those high-end players are dealing with. So they're not necessarily wrong. They're not wrong at all, but it's just they apply to a much smaller pool of individuals. So that's where I'm coming from when I share my experiences. Moving forward, what is the issue, right? What is the issue with healing? And then how did we get into this issue? So right now, the current issue really comes down to that healers are probably the most complex role to play. Probably, right? Tanks, I understand you could probably make a pretty good argument here, and if you want to drop it in the comments, you can, but that's a video for another time. So just kind of going over our responsibilities, right? So we have the normal mechanics that everyone has to deal with. We have our healing, right? Our normal job is to heal. And then tying into that, we also have to heal you when you mess up your normal mechanic. So we can kind of tie that into that one. We're in charge of dispelling, right? Most people don't. Mages, decurse. A lot of times, that doesn't happen. Kicking, we have that responsibility. We are responsible for individual mechanics that would otherwise cause a large loss of DPS for a DPS player. For an example, I'll give you Collapsing Star in Gambit, right? That ability that you have to run into and bounce off as it causes damage to go out. A melee DPS is not going to do that because huge loss of damage if he does, and most range aren't going to do it either. So it usually falls upon the healer to do this mechanic most of the time. We're responsible for prioritizing and managing our healing cooldowns and tracking the boss mechanics. Now, I know everyone pretty much does it as well, but we have larger consequences if we fail. If a DPS player fails their rotation, or if they use a large damage cooldown on a smaller pack and not the big pull, right? You can get through it just fine. It's really not that big of an issue, and you'll continue forward. If myself as a healer, if I fat finger a healing cooldown, or if I overlap because I panic, and the next pull that we have, I don't have a healing cooldown, we're just, for the most part, we're probably dead. And that's because I messed up. I didn't manage my healing cooldowns properly. And that's kind of the issue we have right now, is the healing role is very difficult. Another problem, and kind of what I think is the real reason why we're in this current situation, is they made tanks way too self-sufficient and self-reliant. Now, tanks, I'm sorry, I have never met a tank who's like, man, I love relying on my healer to keep myself alive, right? Not a one. Every single time I've talked to a tank or any video I've watched, they love being self-sufficient and self-reliant. However, that causes the issue of, if you have a self-reliant tank who doesn't use the healer, well, what's the point of the healing role? So what Blizzard had to do is they had to put out more damage and larger spike damage to keep the healer entertained, to keep them a valuable aspect of the team. I mean, we saw plenty of times as well where some teams were taking one tank and 4 DPS. Because if you did the mechanics correctly, and if you avoided any large damage dealing abilities, you could get through a dungeon without a healer. Using your defensives, using your potions, stuff like that, it was fine. So in order to keep the healer role relevant, they had to push out more damage across the entire group. And because they did this, they then had to give DPS players more sustainability and more defensives. So now there's this huge bloat of all these classes having multiple defensives just to allow survivability through the dungeon. And that's where I think the major issue is and why we're in this situation. So the changes that are coming in Midnight, all classes, all roles are getting less defensive abilities. I mean, most of you weren't pressing your defensive abilities anyways, so I feel like it's not too big of a deal. No, but I know there's a lot of people upset in the forums. I've seen shamans talking about, hey, like, we only have 2 defensive abilities and you're getting rid of one of them. Okay, now we're even more squishy than we already were. You have mages saying, hey, you're getting rid of all of our defensive abilities and we have the lowest health pool next to priests. You know, we're one of the squishiest classes and now we're even squishier. Like, this is not okay. And they're really concerned about this. And I think you should really be concerned if the damage profile is exactly the same in Midnight as it is right now in the War Within. If the dungeons are the same, there's the same damage output happening throughout the dungeons, yeah, you should be concerned. You're screwed. There's no way you're gonna stay alive. However, I don't think that's gonna be the case. If you think about all the times you've died in a dungeon, if you look at your death, you know, you can see what caused you to die. Most of the time you died within a 0.1 to a 2-second window, right? So 0.1 second to 2 seconds, you died within that window sometime. I think moving forward, they're expanding that window. So there's going to be less burst damage. There's going to be less AoE damage happening. And you're probably going to die. If you do die, you're going to die between, I don't know, maybe a 4 to an 8-second window. Because a 0.1 second window to a 2-second window, there's not a whole lot your healer is going to do. If you didn't hit your defensive, if you didn't use a potion, a lock rock, like, that was your responsibility and you died. Your healer wasn't going to do anything about it. Now moving forward again into Midnight, having a larger window of the damage profile, your healer actually has a chance to keep you alive and do his job. And if you have all these additional abilities, all these defensives and sustainability, then we're just going to go back to where we were, where you're really not going to need a healer. So you have to keep the healer relevant into the situation. So another change that they're giving to healers, wonderful change. No, not really. They're removing kicks. Every single healer is getting their kick removed. Priests, I know you have no idea what I'm talking about, so that's okay. You can just skip a little bit further on if you want to. And the only healer that will have a kick is a shaman, and it will be a 30-second kick. It'll be on a 30-second timer. And I think there's 2 groups of healers in this situation. There's the ones that are super excited about this. Yeah, we don't have to kick anymore. And then you have the healers that are, you know, not too thrilled about it. And I think these healers, the ones that are excited about it, I don't think they were kicking anyways. So I don't know why they're excited when they weren't going to do it anyways. I'm not too thrilled about it. And the reason why is kicking is practically healing. You're preventing damage. And in most groups, I would say that the large majority of the players weren't really expecting the healer to kick anyways. Like, it's a nice thing to have. But a lot of the times, if a group wiped and there's a missed kick, they're going to go into details and they're going to see that the warrior who has 3 kicks and they're halfway through the dungeon, they're going to yell at that guy before they're going to tell me, hey, like, why didn't you kick that? You know what I mean? Like, I'm the healer, you know? It's nice to have, but they're going to attack the warrior first. That's how it's going to happen. And usually the way I would use my kick is I would go into a pull. I would set focus to a mob, a specific mob that I knew had a large damage ability that I didn't want to heal through. So I'd set focus, I would sit on that target, and I would wait for him to cast that ability. When he cast it, I would kick it. If somebody beat me to the cast and they kicked it first, normally I wouldn't kick anything else during that time. I would just wait for that spell, for the mob to start casting the spell again, and I would attempt to kick it. Because it's way easier to kick a spell, to kick a cast from an enemy, than it is to have the cast go off and pop a healing cooldown and try and keep your team alive. So at the end of the day, you're healing by preventing the damage. And I just think it's an unfortunate utility that they're taken away from healers to make it less stressful. And again, it's really not that stressful to kick, because the people who did think it weren't kicking anyways. And I personally think that the number one reason for a bricked key was because of a missed kick. Think about all the dungeons you didn't time. all right, what was the reason? Like, if you really break it down, what was the reason? A lot of the times, if not most of the time, it was because we missed a kick. A large damage ability goes off, no one hit it, it hits everybody, the healer can't heal through it, they're dead. Oh, we could blame the healer, sure, or you could have kicked and it wouldn't have mattered and we would have been fine. Oh, that's like the majority of the reason why dungeons are bricked. I'm specifically thinking Arakara. Like, let's be honest, going to Arakara, every one of those poison casts, like, you gotta be kicked if you miss it. It's GG's. Like, that's it's tough. So again, it's just unfortunate that they're getting rid of kicks. Another change in general, they're just, I mean, I already mentioned this, but altogether they're getting rid of a lot of abilities for all classes, you know, including healers. So this could make the gameplay a little more mundane, less engaging, less, you know, thought-provoking of how you're going to tackle an encounter, because I think healing really comes down to problem solving. You go into a boss, and your goal as the healer is to problem solve and figure out how you are going to keep your team alive using the tools that you have. So the less tools you have, well, it's less fun. And a post, and Blizzard posted, they mentioned that gameplay should have some element of interest or intention. If individual abilities are frequently macroed or consistently used alongside another, well, they're not adding meaningful gameplay. Removing some of these abilities will simplify long sequences of abilities that are usually cast in the same order during openers or cooldown windows. Simple maintenance buffs, where you periodically use an ability with no other strategic considerations, fall into this category as well. An example for a healer that they gave was Restoration Druid's Efflorescence is an example of a simple maintenance buff. So getting rid of all your abilities obviously could make it way more boring and less thought-provoking on how you're going to solve this issue of keeping everybody alive. But I also think that if you are bored with the content that you're doing, this is a sign that you should be doing probably more difficult content. Now, if you're doing the highest level content and you're bored, I think this is a problem, and this is where we should start looking into changing up a class and a role. But until that point, it's hard to tell if it's going to be boring or not, but it could be for sure. So at the end of the day, in my opinion, Blizzard must maintain the Holy Trinity. The tank, the healer, the DPS, they all must be relevant. You might as well just remove the healers altogether. I know some of you might think that's a good idea, but I just don't think that's going to happen. So we have to make them relevant. So that's why I think this is a good avenue in which they're taking is, I'm sorry tanks, I'm sorry DPS, you guys are going to lose your defensives, you're going to lose your sustainability, and you're going to have to rely on your healer now. It is what it is. I think it's also adding by subtracting. It's going to make it more accessible for players to pick up the healing role for new players. I feel like WoW doesn't get a lot of new players anyways, but you know, from a DPS player wanting to swap over to a healer role, it'll make it more accessible, less daunting, and hopefully it'll simplify it without making it too shallow. And then this is laying a foundation. They're taking a ton of stuff away, and they're bringing us back to kind of the bare minimum, the foundation of every role and every class, and we can only go up from here. So Midnight Season 1, yeah, it could be boring, but they're not going to take more away. I mean, they shouldn't. They can always add, though. I think just laying the foundation that they have and being able to build upon it makes looking into the future a little more bright. So it might be copium as well. I don't know. What do you guys think? I think you shouldn't be too concerned. Like, I think it's gonna be okay. We're still gonna have fun. I mean, or we're just not gonna play anymore. So it is what it is. All right. Well, I appreciate you guys for sticking around and watching. If you made it this far in the video, give it a like or give it a dislike. If you think I'm completely wrong and my takes are bad, yeah, downvote the video, you know, saying that you disagree with me. But I'd appreciate it if you'd hit the subscribe button. But until next time, be safe, good luck, have fun. We'll see you in the next one.